we will dive in. All right, well, we'll go ahead and dive in. It looks like a few people are still filtering in, but my name's Katie. I'm with Rewiring America's Partnerships and Engagement team. And we're truly thrilled to be having this discussion with you all today, and for the panelists that we have here today to be on to talk about their programs. At Rewiring America, we like to say that we're optimists, and this work that has been commenced in Ithaca and Menlo Park with BlocPower really helps feed that. It's sometimes, I'm sure everyone on the call feels sometimes hard to keep that optimistic spirit alive, but I think today and some of the events of the last month at the federal level certainly help to do that. So thank you all for joining. Just a couple of items up top. We are going to be able to have, we'll have some remarks from the panelists up front, but then we'll open it up for discussion. And so if you don't mind staying muted, and when you do have a question, you can raise your hand in the Zoom function or drop a question in the chat, and I'll be moderating those in the second half of our meeting. Speaker view is probably best for this format because we have a sizable panel on, and you can toggle to that generally in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. And we are, as the Zoom audio announced, we are going to be recording this. We had a few requests for a recording for people that weren't able to make it. So if you have any questions or concerns about that, you can just drop me a note privately in the chat or by email. I'll leave my email address as well. With that, I just wanted to give a quick thank you up top to a few members of the Rewiring team that are here. We have Ian Magruder on, who leads our private sector outreach. I think he's on, yes, Ian. And Kelsey, who's a force who's been extremely helpful in getting all of the logistics for this meeting up and running. And we also have the head of partnerships and engagement, Keisha Austin, on, and I'm going to hand it over to her to give a quick welcome to everyone.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here this afternoon. I know no one is here to hear me talk for a very long time, so I certainly don't want to take up much of your time, but I do want to thank you very much. And I especially want to thank our panelists today, Mayor Lewis, Luis, Mayor Nash, Angela, Diane, Bailey, Donnel. Oh my gosh, we're so lucky to have you all here to talk about the great work that you have been doing. It is so innovative and inspiring, and a part of the work that we do here at Rewiring America and on the partnerships and engagement team is trying to bring together organizations like BlocPower with cities that are at the forefront of this work, like Ithaca and Menlo Park, who inspire us daily in the work that they're doing. And we feel very lucky to be a part of this discussion, and also having BlocPower be a part of our CEO coalition as well is something that is super helpful in making sure that we are electrifying households across this country together in an innovative way. So thank you very much for being here today. We appreciate all of your participation and your attendance. Thanks. And thanks to the team.
Awesome. Thanks, Keisha. Okay, great. So two quick things up top. I just wanted to mention, we released an IRA calculator, which I'll drop the link in the chat. But if anyone's interested in it, I think it's a helpful tool for constituents, friends, family, yourself, in explaining IRA benefits. And so we're hoping to continue to spread the word about that. So we'll drop that in the chat. And also the group that's here today are part of our coalitions. We have a municipal coalition and a group of CEOs that have come together and taken a pledge to electrify their cities, companies. And we would love for anyone in your network that would be appropriate to join those, whether they're locally electeds or business leaders. And so we'll drop those links as well. I know we have a sort of wide group of people on, and we would love to bring more into the fold for conversations like these in the future. So we'll be providing both of those too. So with that, we'll go ahead and jump into the discussion for today. So like I said, there's enormous reason to be optimistic because of the programs that we're here to talk about today. So both Ithaca on the East Coast and Menlo Park on the West Coast have embarked on the most ambitious building decarbonization programs in the country. And I think we've maybe seen read headlines about that. We've, seen posts about it and have cheered it on. But I think anyone who's witnessed or worked at the government level, city level, or private sector level on getting any of this done, there's an enormous amount of work behind the scenes that goes into ideating something like this to execution. And there's an enormous amount that still has to be done. And so we're incredibly grateful for the work that is being demonstrated and all of the work that's been done to get everyone to this point with their programs. And so I want to hand it over first. We'll have the Menlo Park group talk a bit about what they've done, what they're planning on doing. The Ithaca group talk about what they've done in BlocPower and speak to their role in that. And then we'll have Q&A afterwards. So Mayor Nash and Angela and Diane, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much. And hello, everyone. I'm delighted to join you today to talk about innovative public-private partnerships to deal with climate change on a practical level. On June 14th this year, the City of Menlo Park forged an innovative public-private partnership with BlocPower with the goal of providing building electrification services throughout our city. I'm proud of this historic commitment. It is the first program of its kind on the West Coast. With BlocPower, we aim to help property owners electrify over 10,000 homes and other buildings by 2030 on a voluntary and equitable basis. Simultaneously, we expect to create hundreds of new green jobs in our community, particularly through targeted training and jobs that support electrification. We hope this model will be replicated by many other cities too. Menlo Park has a history of leadership on climate. We adopted a climate action plan with an ambitious goal of carbon neutrality by 2030. Decarbonizing buildings is a central component of the plan because fossil fuel consumption in buildings accounts for 41% of our greenhouse gas emissions. But electrification can be challenging since most local contractors are unfamiliar with heat pumps and electric replacements for gas appliances. That lack of local experience makes electrification projects more expensive and time-consuming. Our collaboration with BlocPower includes workforce training that will create local jobs, particularly targeting the shortage of specific labor skills needed to scale this program and other electrification projects. We are working with the local nonprofit JobTrain to provide pathways to work in the fast-growing green jobs sector by providing training in installing electrical appliances. JobTrain is specifically committed to helping individuals reclaim their lives from poverty and unemployment by preparing them for careers in high demand and emerging fields. JobTrain's values map well with equity and community goals that Menlo Park and BlocPower share. Our discussion with BlocPower began just over a year ago, led by Environmental Commissioner Angela Evans and local nonprofit MenloSpark with Diane Bailey. They began to explore potential pilot projects, and it quickly became clear that BlocPower could help the city substantially, particularly with an initial focus on the community of Bellhaven, which is a historically underserved neighborhood in Menlo Park. Last December, I met with BlocPower's CEO, Donnel Baird, to explore how they might be able to work with the city. I was impressed by Donnel's high-tech approach combined with a big heart in his concept of providing full home upgrades citywide and prioritizing households that needed it most. He conceived a program that could quickly ramp up to help hundreds of Menlo Park homeowners and businesses who want to voluntarily replace gas burning appliances with electric. The program contemplates a concierge or one-stop shop for homeowners and building owners that is deeply appealing as a way to eliminate the current hassle factor involved in deciding to electrify a home. We spent 6 months working with city staff, stakeholders, and leaders to work out an arrangement that ramps up over 3 years to provide high-quality electrification services to homes and businesses at no cost to the city and including job training. This is a win-win-win for the city, the community, and our climate. We jump-started the program by working directly with BlocPower. We found no other programs that were comprehensive and could scale up at the speed that BlocPower could. And we opted to rely on outside supporters to raise the capital needed for the program. Supporting nonprofits such as MenloSpark and other supporters, including our state senator, Josh Becker, have raised enough funding to get the program off to a strong start. As a result, we are fortunate to have $4.5 million from the state of California, which will cover the cost of at least 200 low-income households to receive full upgrades under the program. We aim to electrify 15 buildings in the remaining months of this year, 100 next year, and 1,000 or more per year in 2024 and beyond. The voluntary upgrades available through this program include heat pumps for air cooling, heating, and air filtration, heat pump water heaters, electric vehicle charging stations, solar panels, battery storage, and other efficiency measures. Helping homeowners and businesses in Menlo Park voluntarily replace old gas appliances with clean electric ones has real appeal as a low-cost way to build momentum to achieving our city's climate goals. It is a market-based solution instead of using city staff and city resources. I expect it will also help staff streamline the approval process for electrification permits. As the impacts of climate change are felt locally and around the world, Menlo Park and BlocPower can play a vital role in helping electrification go mainstream and spread throughout the Bay Area, the state, and together with Ithaca and other cities, the nation. We look forward to seeing more programs like this around the country. And now I will turn it back to the moderator, Katie. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor Nash. And also, I loved, we had the chance to interview Diane and Angela for a newsletter. And one of the quotes that they gave was on how to succeed was that understanding that progress begets progress, which I loved. And we hope that this conversation today will do that as well in helping spread some of the work that you've done. I'm going to hand it over next to our friends in Ithaca, Mayor Lewis and Luis.
Take it away, Mayor.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for hosting this very innovative and important event this afternoon. And it is really wonderful to hear from our neighbors across the country on the West Coast and a number of the things you commented on, Mayor Nash, we will also be commenting on. So we have benefited in the city of Ithaca from support from our city council. It was in 2019 that our Common Council unanimously passed Green New Deal, Ithaca's Green New Deal. In 2021, we hired a director of sustainability, which I'm delighted when Luis joined our staff. And emissions in the city of Ithaca add to a total of approximately 310,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, with approximately 40% coming from energy use inside buildings. Things such as heat for space, water, cooking, heating spaces, that is, drying clothes, 40% from transportation, including single passenger vehicles, transit, public transit. I will note here that our public transit system has been purchasing electric buses, and that is a tremendous benefit to the community. 15% from the electric grid and 5% from organic and material waste. Addressing emissions from buildings requires first a reduction in energy use, and second, the replacement of space and water heating systems that rely on natural gas, propane, or fuel oil with heat pumps, as well as replacing cooktops with induction systems and replacing gas-powered clothes dryers with heat pumps. Through energy efficiency and electrification, the city of Ithaca could reduce greenhouse gases by close to 40%. Can also incentivize the reduction of carbon emissions from transportation by replacing current buildings' electrical wiring with electric vehicle-ready installations. Could also accelerate the decarbonization of the electrical grid by deploying rooftop solar systems wherever and whenever possible. And I will say we're very fortunate in Ithaca that there is a tremendous interest in rooftop solar systems. In November 2021, Ithaca's Common Council approved the designation of BlocPower as program manager for the city's electrification program. And we had a formal kickoff of the Electrify Ithaca program here in the city on July 14th. And that kickoff was held at Southside Community Center, a community center with a mission and a focus on the interests, needs, and involvement, engagement of our population of color in the city of Ithaca. The electrification program, as has been mentioned by Mayor Nash, is meant to be a voluntary program open to participation of residential, commercial, and special purpose buildings, including schools, houses of worship, and parking structures. Through participation, again, similar to what was mentioned by Mayor Nash, building owners may receive an energy assessment of potential energy efficiency improvements and replacement of fossil fuel appliances, known as thermal loads, followed by a scope of work together with estimated cost and low-cost financing options. Following agreement between the program manager and the building owner, BlocPower assigns the contract to a local contracting company. And I think this is a key feature to mention. We are interested in working with our local contractors and in creating green jobs, also as Mayor Nash has mentioned. To upfront the costs of this program, BlocPower will upfront the capital and labor costs associated with each individual project and creating a customized 10 to 15 year leasing program for building owners. The benefits of the program include reduction of greenhouse gas emissions from energy use inside buildings, a reduction in electricity, improved indoor air quality by reducing methane leaks from furnaces, stoves, water heaters, and dryers, and lower electricity bills, and an opportunity to access financing and government incentives, such as those in the Inflation Reduction Act. So Katie, I was very glad to hear you talk about that. The program considers potential necessary infrastructure upgrades to the city's distribution grid, for which the city, through the Sustainability Office, is engaging the utility company. This is the New York State Electric and Gas, NYSEG, as well as the Public Service Commission. The program also considers workforce development, as has been mentioned. And for that reason, the city, through the Sustainability Office, is engaging workforce development organizations, such as our local two-year college, Tompkins Cortland Community College, our BOCES program, Cornell Cooperative Extension, Tompkins County Workforce Development Board, and our Finger Lakes Reuse. We are extremely fortunate in our city to have wonderful partners with whom we're able to work and with whom we share a joint mission and goal. The program also considers climate justice as a key component, currently based on the federal program Justice 40 and the state's definition of disadvantaged communities. The city of Ithaca has developed a strategy to identify climate justice communities. That is, those communities who are disadvantaged because of economic, environmental, social, or other demographic factors, which may mean that residents are susceptible to disproportionately impacts and effects from climate change. And our goal, our mission is to serve those communities by making sure they receive special consideration when developing incentive programs with the state government and the utility company. Very recently, in May 2022, the city of Ithaca approved a local definition of climate justice communities, incorporating place-based information to identify communities that the state and federal definition cannot capture due to the granularity of the US Census information. So this too is a way that we look to implement and carry out our goals. So thank you. I'll turn it back to Katie.
Thank you so much, Mayor Lewis. You spoke a bit about the breadth of partners that are involved in making all of this happen in Ithaca. And we're excited to dive into that more. I believe Donnel from BlocPower has joined. And I would love to turn it over to Donnel, who's the CEO of BlocPower and has been at the Nexus a lot for a lot of this private sector work. Donnel, are you? I'm scrolling through.
Hey, how are you?
You're there. Okay, awesome. Hey, Donnel.
Hi everyone. Hey, Mayor Lewis. Hey, Mayor Nash. Hey, Louise. Hi, everybody. Hi, Angela. It's so good to see so many of you on the same call. What a powerful network that's being built here of leaders on the climate revolution. Hey, Rebecca, how are you? I'm Donnel Baird. I run BlocPower. We have been inspired by Ithaca and Menlo Park to continue to try and figure out how to respond to the climate crisis with the speed and scale and urgency that is required. That's what we're about. That's what the mayors are about and their teams are about. We're delighted to partner with them and follow their lead as they think about how best to green their cities and want to facilitate that as best as possible. I actually think Mayor Nash, I think your neighbor San Jose is actually going to approve today in the city council that they're going to work with us to decarbonize the city of San Jose. So you all are going to be joined, Mayor Lewis, by the third city in the world that wants to be carbon free by 2030, which will be San Jose. And so I hope that all of you from this call and before and after will continue to we'll all be in conversation together about how best we can all partner to kind of really lead the way for the world on how to share what we're learning about how to decarbonize all the buildings in a city so that we can inspire other cities around the country and around the world to do the same. So with that, I'm super excited to continue listening and learning from everybody else on the call.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Donnel. Okay, so we're going to head over to questions and answers. So as I said at the beginning, if you have anything, drop it in the chat and raise your hand. I think someone has already dropped something into the chat and Diane has already answered it. So things are moving expeditiously. But we'll raise that in a minute. But we did have a couple that were submitted in advance. So I'm going to go ahead and start with one of those. So the question is, how was the groundwork for the program laid in the local community? Building support, I think, whether it's, for the policy itself, education on the policy itself, and building support for execution. Mayor Lewis, I know you spoke in depth about workforce development. Mayor Nash, maybe I'll hand it first to you to talk about, or anyone on your team to talk about some of the groundwork that was done with nonprofits, workforce organizations, labor, et cetera.
Thank you very much. So we have been having we've had lots of meetings with the community, with labor leaders, with other nonprofits, trying to really work together on going forward together. And it's been something where there's been a lot. I think we can't underestimate how much outreach and education is needed in the community about just what we are doing, why we are doing it, and how to go about doing it. It's people are hungry for information. And I think when we do hit resistance, it's typically because of a lack of information or misinformation. And so just the more, I would just emphasize, the more we go out to the community, the more we go and talk with all of the various partners, it's just been a real game changer. And I will let Diane and Angela talk more specifically about some of the outreach that's been done.
I see somebody has a question. Are we going to be able to ask questions as we go along?
Yeah, we definitely will. So we'll, this one had been submitted in advance, and then we'll turn to the group. But Diane and Angela, if you have anything to add on community engagement.
Yeah, Diane and I probably both have things to add. Thank you, Mayor Nash. I also wanted to say too, we're been so lucky to have Mayor Nash's leadership throughout this entire process. She has been championing this since the very beginning, until it got all the way through to council, and then it passed unanimously. So thank you, Mayor Nash, for that. And yeah, I will just add to what you said, Mayor Nash, that we're also we're building what we call a community advisory board with about 12 to 15 community leaders. And the idea is for those leaders to represent a very broad swath of our community, and for them to bring their connections and diverse perspectives to the table as we tackle really important issues like how do we work with labor, what kind of rental protections do we need and how do we go about that, et cetera, et cetera. Diane, did you want to add something as well?
I think that sums it up well. Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
Great, thank you for that. We'll hand it over to Dave. I see you have your hand raised. Dave Morrow.
Okay, yeah, there I go. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Yes, I have a question for Ithaca, New York. When you were BlocPower is procuring all these contractors and they are paying their wages, are they paying the prevailing wage of the local area, or are we just go in, whoever wants to bid on this, we're going to take the lowest price, so on and so forth? How have you been structuring your payment to the workers?
Mayor, if you don't mind, I can take this one.
Please go ahead, Luis. Thank you.
Yeah, we are working with BlocPower. There is a key component of equity in everything that we're doing in the city of Ithaca. And BlocPower and the city of Ithaca agreed that we need to pay a living wage. We need to make sure that people can, build from the work that they're doing with us and develop a proper career. So we are talking about prevailing wages. Definitely, we're talking about helping people develop not only the technical expertise to participate in this, but also the vision and the necessary soft skills and understanding of everything that is happening around them, so they can be part of something much bigger. So the intention is for people to join, and it could be apprenticeship programs, pre-apprenticeship programs, on-the-job training. But then, they can graduate and eventually perhaps become entrepreneurs. And the idea is to support them throughout, that whole process. And one key component that we have agreed on is to make sure that we go and bring people from communities that normally are left out. We're trying to bring people from, frontline communities. It could be formerly incarcerated, it could be undocumented, it could be people that for some reason, it could be minorities, are being left out of the decision making and the transition itself. So this is all part of what we're trying to do.
How was that working out for you when you go to, you're saying the people that are left behind? Are you getting much traction with these individuals?
Every day we get more traction. Every day it's better. At the very beginning, it was a new program. There was a lot of explanation. Mayor Luis has been adamant about the need to explain, to make sure that people understand every single time. The mayor doesn't want us to move too fast because we are at risk of leaving the community behind. So for that reason, we are starting slow. Our workforce development program had its first cohort graduating last Friday. So we have 7 newly trained individuals, all of them from frontline communities, all of them. And
And-
it was wonderful to see that. And with these came trust. The people that came to support them at the graduation, they start asking questions how they could join. So I believe that this is a bit of a snowball that we are creating. We're going to see more people registering for the programs, and we're hopeful that we're going to be successful at bringing these communities on board.
That's
And
great.
where-
Thank
and
you.
where-
Thank you, Luis. And
Where-
I did.
I saw some more. So where do these people that graduate? What do
Well,
they graduate with?
I do want to make sure that we have time for ample questions from the group, including some that were submitted in advance and were coming in via the chat, Dave. So
Okay.
we'll jump over to a couple of those. There was one from Jeffrey about just wanting to get a sense of some additional maybe tactics like requiring disclosure of utility bills or giving home grades for energy efficiency. It's sort of broad, but Donnel, you might be able to speak to whether or not that's something that you've looked at in your programming at all.
Yeah, could you restate the question?
Yeah, so it's from Jeffrey Peroni, and he was just interested in thoughts on some additional tactics like giving home grades and requiring disclosures on utility bills. Do you look at tactics like that when you're thinking through programming?
Well, I'm not super familiar with disclosures on utility bills, although prompts on utility bills is incredibly important. And obviously the founders of Rewiring America really believe in prompts on utility bills when they built BlocPower, which is an incredibly successful company that uses utility bill information to encourage homeowners to do energy efficiency upgrades and behavior management. In New York, I was very skeptical of letter grades on buildings as being a tactic that would actually be super effective. I thought it was kind of hokey and not technical enough, but we've been really surprised by, all of the buildings in New York City that are above, I want to say 50,000 square feet, maybe it's 25,000, but bigger buildings in New York all receive letter grades on the front of the building. Just like if you walk into a restaurant in New York City, there's a grade in the front window that tells you, hey, the health inspector says this restaurant is super healthy, so it gets an A, or it's mediocre, so it gets a C. We now have energy efficiency letter grades for all big buildings in New York City. And it's had a remarkable impact. I think that it actually increases property values. When the letter grade is an A for energy efficiency, it actually decreases property values when letter grades are lower. Large tenants will refuse to sign a lease in a building that has a poor letter grade. Insurance companies change their underwriting. So it actually has a huge impact when you look at assigning letter grades to folks. One of the things we're working on is Jeff Bezos' Climate Foundation has given us a grant to start to analyze all of the buildings in America. So there's 125 million buildings. And of course, starting with Ithaca and Menlo Park. But we're starting to analyze, all of the buildings as best we can and offer preliminary letter grades using statistics and machine learning. And folks can fill out quizzes and information to give us more accurate information so that we can provide accurate letter grades. But we think letter grades are important because it provides transparency and some amount of guidance to building owners around where they stand with regard to emissions and their contribution to the climate crisis.
Great, thank you, Donnel.
Sure.
We have a question from Celine, which I think is probably endemic of a question that a lot of people have as intrinsic to this discussion, is it's so based on this financing model. So I was hoping, I think, Luis, you always speak sort of poetically about this. Do you want to talk a little bit about how this works just generally? And we can maybe extend the question to some others on the panel, but it would be great if you gave us an overview and your thoughts on financing something like this.
Sure. I think for a really long time, we were, relying very heavily on subsidies and incentives only. And, there's just not enough money in America to, transform every building, into a Tesla, like BlocPower wants. It's so there is a need to rely on private capital to do this. But when you talk about private capital, you need to be very careful, because you need to make sure that you remain in control of what you're doing, but also you need to make sure that everybody has access to this. So there is an element of financial inclusion. So and with that I mean, people need to have access to affordable financing options. So when we started looking at this, we realized that we needed to get the money to upfront the cost, and then in that way, remove one of the key barriers that people had, which was the initial cost of retrofitting and electrifying. We did several models in which we saw, for example, homes that all homes that in our city, for example, more than 80% are 100-year-old houses. So some of them would be $40,000 to do full retrofitting and electrification. So how do you expect somebody, specifically low-income families, to afford that? So we start talking to private equity firms. We started talking to companies like BlocPower, and we discovered that we could do this if we were able to to raise the necessary capital to upfront the cost, and then eventually develop a capital lease or an operating lease or a low interest loan program for people. So we started looking at how we could do that, and the different elements that come into it. For example, to guarantee financial inclusion, we needed to create a loan loss reserve that would basically cover against the probability of default on a particular bracket of the population. We consider options like insurance against catastrophic losses, for example, in case of COVID or something like that again. So at the end of the day, it was something that was put together with private investors that could come in either as equity investors or as lenders, perhaps, and together with money from the government that could come in to help lower the cost of capital. And by looking at at each city, Menlo Park or Ithaca, in a comprehensive manner, we could have a programmatic financing model that would allow us to create economies of scale, also to reduce the cost of capital. So the model at the end of the day is and is not complicated. It is if you try to set it all up. But at the end of the day, when you think about how am I going to use this, you come in, you talk to BlocPower, you do an energy assessment, they tell you what they can do for you, they tell you what the financial options are, and then based on that, you decide whether you accept or not, and then you participate in the program. And I'm going to use this as a segue to pass it to Donnel, because I think Donnel could do a much better job than me at explaining what he's offering specifically.
Whatever. I think Luis is a genius, and I am always excited to learn from him. And he pretends like he didn't put this whole program together, but that's not true. So that's my response to you, Luis. But yeah, if there's additional clarity that I can help provide, I'm happy to. Katie, what's helpful here?
Well, I think it may be helpful. We can use this as a bridge to another conversation, which you've questioned that you've answered in the chat. But I think there are cities that are on today that are wondering if they're interested in embarking on something like this. How do they start to go about putting the pieces together? And I think it may be a phone call and just setting up a meeting. But if you want to speak a little bit about what steps are some of the first steps, foundational steps that need to be laid to kick something like this off, that would be great.
Well, for me, there's always challenges, right? In every city. I mean, Mayor Nash and Angela and Diane ran into a set of challenges and opportunities, right? Mayor Lewis and Louise and Rebecca ran into challenges and opportunities in Ithaca, San Jose, a whole different ballgame. I mean, we're working with Cambridge and Atlanta and DC and Baltimore. There's a bunch of cities that are going to do a couple hundred buildings or a few thousand buildings. And what we see as being really important is will. It sounds kind of simple and oversimplification, but when you look at Ithaca or Menlo Park, like what you see is a willingness to be on the cutting edge and lead the world in figuring out how a municipal government can and should respond to the climate crisis. So if you have that willingness to lead, then BlocPower will find a way to help you whether it's raising capital or training workers, as we do. We have 1,000 workers in New York that we train because that's what New York needs. We need to increase the labor supply, or data analysis, whatever it is that you need. Once you have the willingness and the willpower to participate and be on the leadership edge of the climate fight, like, we will all as a community rise up to support you in that leadership. I think specifically looking at the city policy and what kind of commitment you've made to decarbonize parts of your city, whether it's buildings or transportation or both, by 2030. You know, there are cities, they're not as courageous enough as Ithaca and Menlo Park to do 100% by 2030, but they're willing to do 40% or 50% by 2030, and that's important. And so we're talking with the city of San Luis Obispo, and they've made a commitment to green 40% of the city by 2030. That's a lot of buildings. And I think yesterday we were in a meeting with them, and I don't think they realize how many buildings 40% of San Luis Obispo actually is, right? It's a lot of buildings. And so we are excited to jump on webinars like this or Zoom calls to kind of walk through the specifics of what your city needs. It varies city to city, right? The needs of Ithaca are different from the needs of Menlo Park, or different from San Jose or Atlanta or DC, but the end goal is the same. And so we want to construct a program with you that is affordable and will get you to reaching your decarbonization goals. I will say that my investors are really angry at me. They're super proud, but they're really angry because we're not charging a lot of money for these programs. So we want to make it affordable for Ithaca or Menlo Park or San Jose to be able to work with us. It's like a couple $100,000, pretty negligible. But you know, it's really, again, about the willingness and the willingness to lead and be on the global stage. You know, Luis and Rebecca and Angela and I mean, and the mayors, I'm sure they're being contacted by cities all over the world who are interested. There's lots of folks, reporters, other cities who have questions. There's this webinar itself where they're taking time out of their busy schedule to explain the kind of work that they're doing. And so it really is the appetite to lead, and the rest of the stuff we will solve with you and for you. It's as simple as that.
I'll second that, Donnel. This is Angela from Menlo Park. That, you know, in some ways, when we describe our program, it can sound complicated, but in other ways, it feels very straightforward, this win-win-win that Mayor Nash described. And I think that, you know, as we were getting this going and we would articulate all the pieces to all the stakeholders involved, it almost felt like a, dare I say, no-brainer. And so, you know, certainly the technology exists. Heat pumps are 4 to 5 times more efficient than their gas counterparts. And we have the capabilities to do this, and we have access to BlocPower that is willing to be this concierge service and hold our hands along the way. And so, again, like I said before, we're grateful that Mayor Nash had the political will to see this through for us, and it's not always easy, but I totally agree. Having that courage to be amongst the first is really important.
That's great. Thank you, Angela. And I think on that, if you want to stay on for a moment, I think there was a question from Julie Roth, who I believe is in Ann Arbor, on the Ann Arbor team, about the concierge service, which I know is not directly sits within Menlo Park, but I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to what your community engagement strategy and education strategy looks like for electrification generally, and sort of what questions the community has had about the program that you think have been most pertinent to answer.
And are you asking about Menlo Park specifically?
Yeah, just as you've launched, sort of, I think curiosity is piqued within, I would imagine that it is. So if you want to speak to what that education effort has looked like.
Yeah, I can start, and then Diane and Mayor Nash, please feel free to weigh in. I think, you know, one piece that remains important is myth busting. I think it's important to educate people about the basics of why this works. We've begun an outreach effort, and I think there's a lot more work to be done there. A lot of times we hear basic concerns like, well, if you're electrifying your appliances, but then you're going on the grid and the grid is dirty, aren't you just shifting one fossil fuel demand for another? In our case, the answer to that is no. We're lucky that our energy provider is Peninsula Clean Energy. PG&E provides the infrastructure, but we have Peninsula Clean Energy, and we have 100% carbon-free power. So for us, it makes a ton of sense to electrify. We're getting these immediate emission reductions. And most people, though, don't know that, aren't educated in our community yet. And so it's busting these myths about why this doesn't work. It's educating people about the mechanics of a heat pump and the fact that they're incredibly more efficient than their gas counterparts, and that the gas counterparts are about to probably become stranded assets in the near future. So myth busting is really important, and it's important to educate everyone, not just part of the community, but parts of the community that we, as a city, perhaps have not been as successful at reaching in the past. Our lower income community, and bringing those in and bringing those voices and making sure that they're on our community advisory board to help us make really good decisions about how we're going to run this program. Diane or Mayor Nash?
Sure, I'll just jump in and say, there's no shortage of support and interest throughout Menlo Park, which has been wonderful. And so it wasn't a surprise when the program launched that we had about 30 signups immediately. And we haven't been advertising the program very much because we're still working on the underlying mechanics of vetting the contractors and getting the program set up. But the reason there's so much interest in Menlo Park and throughout Silicon Valley is because our communities have been working for some time on electrification, and Menlo Park was really the first city to innovate on that concept of REACH codes that require all electric new construction for new homes and buildings way back in 2019. And after the city of Menlo Park adopted that policy, dozens of cities followed suit, that it absolutely makes sense for new construction, but for existing homes, it can be a little tricky. And so we, our coalition of groups that are part of the campaign for fossil-free buildings in Silicon Valley, we've been hearing for several years now from residents throughout the area, frustration around the challenges of trying to electrify their homes as they become aware of the hazards of gas, the health hazards, the air quality, air pollution, as well as methane as a climate super pollutant. Folks are really clamoring for help. And the concierge service that BlocPower provides is really coming in at exactly the right time to provide this help and meet kind of the groundswell of interest that we're seeing throughout the community.
I'd like to jump in also, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
So in Ithaca, it is certainly important to focus on the myth busting that's already been mentioned. One of the ways we're doing this is getting word out. Allison, who works with BlocPower, I've seen her at a number of our community events and festivals lately. They are tabling, they are getting information to individuals. We're working on all of our 10 council members, alderpersons, arranging info sessions for residents within our smaller ward populations. And I wanted to respond to one of the other questions about how do we address the rural communities, the smaller communities that may not have as much bandwidth for applying for programs. And it is really important that we develop partnerships within our city. Ithaca is a city of only 32,000 people, but we're surrounded by a county that's about 150,000 people. And we need to be working with those rural communities as well as with our Ithaca city proper. And in response to another question about concierge service, an individual interested in creating a map for individual buildings and helping individuals individual residents as well as individual businesses through the process. We want to make sure that we're addressing the questions and meeting people where they are. So that takes getting information out in a variety of formats and working with our partners, our other municipalities, for example, in Tompkins County for us.
That's great. Thank you, Mary Lewis. And if I can maybe keep you and Luis, if that's helpful, on for a second. Will Musser had a question about outreach programs targeted at neighborhood associations for myth busting. Has that been a tactic that's worked or that you've deployed at all?
It's the neighborhood associations, yes, and the ward committees. We have 5 wards in the city of Ithaca, some far more active, some larger wards. Well, actually, they're all equally sized, but they're not equally active. And so, yes, getting information out to ward committees and neighborhood committees. We also have very, very active neighborhood listservs within our city, as I imagine plenty of others do in other cities. And we try to share information on our respective listservs as well. Luis, did you have anything additional to add there?
No, Mayor, I think you covered pretty much, what we would say to that.
Awesome. We had a couple of questions come in prior on, which is a topic that I want to make sure that we touch on before we run out of time here, because it is so important to to these conversations generally, and that's just with equity. And so, Donnel, maybe I'll start with you and how your organization thinks about an equitable approach to electrification from when you're building programs from the ground up to execution, and then we can turn it over to the cities for how they've engaged on that front.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for the question. I mean, our view on equity is there isn't really going to be a climate movement that does not have equity in it. Like, we've been trying for years to do climate justice or a climate response without equity at the forefront. It has not worked. We can see what happened when we tried to pass climate legislation without keeping in mind white working class populations in West Virginia and Appalachia. Didn't work, didn't pass. And we just don't really see a realistic path forward to confronting the climate crisis without equity at the forefront. So equity is not like an afterthought or something that we do because we're like nice liberals or whatever. Like, equity is critical to developing the mass market approach and the political base that's necessary to have a real coalition so that we can actually reduce greenhouse gas emissions at scale in America. And so equity is just critical to that. I think specifically in each city, I think both of these cities, where we're so proud to partner with them, is that has been forefront in their minds and their planning, operationally, strategically, logistically, philosophically, like the whole gamut. Equity has been at the forefront of the plans of both cities. And they can speak more specifically about how they do that, but they have, even though it may not, be top of mind for others as they think about Menlo Park or in Ithaca, they have significant and important low and moderate income communities. And I just think it's remarkable how both of these cities and the leadership and the mayors in both of these cities have led with equity operationally, not just talking about it, but doing it. And Mayor Lewis had commented on that earlier, but I'd hand it back to her and to Mayor Nash.
Yes, equity, as you said, Donnel, and as Louisa said, equity, social justice, racial justice has been central to all of our discussions around electrification. We have already seen in our small-ish city the displacement of communities of color because of our housing costs in the city of Ithaca. We don't want to see displacement as a result of any of the programs we're introducing on electrification. So we want to make sure, for example, that our landlords, our property owners if they are taking out loans to electrify buildings, we want to ensure that costs are not handed down to tenants. We have a rental population in the city of Ithaca. We are a college town, 74% rental population. And we want to make sure that we're not looking at displacing homeowners, landlords, tenants through any of the programs we would introduce. So looking at equity has been central to all of our conversations.
That's great. Mayor Nash, do you have anything to add?
No, I think that Mayor Lewis did a beautiful job, and just it is absolutely must be central to any program.
Yeah, I'll just jump in though and add that, you know, in Menlo Park, the community of Bellhaven is really at the front lines of feeling the impacts of climate change the most, and also is disadvantaged relative to the rest of the city. And so that community has really been the focal point to be prioritized for the home upgrades first. And we are working very hard as a team to do fundraising and to make sure that low-income households, that their needs are met and that their upgrades can be done first and fully covered. We want to make sure that the low-income community is not left bearing the brunt of high gas rates as other kind of wealthier homes leave gas service and start to electrify. And so that's been a huge priority, so much so that with the recent really crushing heat waves in California, we've decided to offer portable cooling units for homes that sign up for the program if they don't have AC and they need it. And we'll be doing the same in the winter to offer portable heating units, even single induction plates for cooking for people who are wanting to get off gas or don't have functional cooling and heating. They've entered the program, but maybe we can't provide the upgrades quickly enough to meet their needs.
I'll also just add, thank you, Diane, that the 4.5 million that Mayor Nash has mentioned a couple of times that came in just a few weeks after our partnership passed is earmarked specifically for our lower income community. So we make sure that those retrofits are going to happen first, that they're ideally no cost or very deeply subsidized. We also have a couple of pilots underway before we even got our formal partnership passed, because we knew with any city, you have to go through some time to get these things passed formally at the council level. And we were anxious to get started, and we chose an affordable housing nonprofit organization called Mid-Peninsula, and we're retrofitting a couple of their properties. And we're also working to retrofit one of our local homeless shelters owned by the Life Moves nonprofit organization. So equity has always been at the forefront of this for us. And it's one of the reasons why partnering with BlocPower made sense, because there was that real mission overlap.
And I would just add that we also, the health impacts of electrification, we have extremely high rates of asthma in our Bellhaven community. And so as we electrify, we anticipate that that will greatly help individuals immediately. So we are really looking forward to that and focused there.
I know we're running out of time. I just want to add one quick thing, Katie, if you don't mind. You know, like we're thinking about, you know, why we're doing this and for whom we're doing it. And we're trying to improve people's lives and make sure that they have better indoor air quality. But at the same time, you know, it gets really complicated when you think about, you know, how, you know, these populations are not necessarily concentrated in a geographical area, and how difficult it is to truly identify climate justice communities. Both cities decided to do this at scale, but doing it at scale actually allows you to really aggregate the demand. And based on that, it allows you to actually make the economic case and the business case for each one of these retrofits and electrification projects. And then when you do the risking at the portfolio level, like the entire city, you know, it allows you also to provide financial inclusion for others. So, you know, like it is all connected in a way that I don't think we have seen before in the climate movement. This is an opportunity to truly transform our cities and bring equity at the forefront, and then serving finally those frontline communities. So I think it's just a beautiful opportunity to do good.
That seems like a beautiful place to maybe close out. Mayor Bonilla, I'm so sorry that I want to be sensitive. I don't know what all of our panelists' schedules are. Can we connect offline and we can.
And I emailed Mayor Bonilla.
Yeah, I got it. Thank you. Let's talk offline. Yeah,
Oh.
thank you.
And
Okay, I apologize. I'm doing a bad job of moderating.
No, this is
Okay, well, thank you all. Thank you all so much.
exciting, guys. Jeez.
I want to thank our panelists for being here today, for all of our participants for coming and leaning into the discussion. I know in the chat there have already been connections about people wanting to start programs. It's exciting, things are happening. So thank you all for spreading the word and being here and for all that you've done. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
Everybody, electrify everything. Bye.